Hi everyone, my name's Em. I've been here a few times, so maybe a few of you might recognise me. Um, I am going to show you today how to make beaded jewellery. But for those of you who aren't big into jewellery, you can also make key rings. To be honest, you can use these little pendants for anything that you like. So I'm on my phone today, so it might be a little bit easier for me to show you up close just a few examples of what we can do. So today I'm going to make a pair of earrings, but I'm just going to show you where we're going to start off with something a little bit like this. Looks really effective, but this is super simple and it's a great way to use up beads that you've just got lying around the house, because I know all of you do. So these ones in these smaller shapes here are going to be what we're going to work on today. And then when you feel confident, you can start buying new frames, a bit fancier frames like this, and work on slightly more complicated pieces. But in general, it's a nice, easy craft, something you can do while sitting watching the TV, which is always fun for me. And yeah, you can do such different and simple things and make different kinds of pieces. So hopefully this will be a great way of using up some of your bead collection. So I will get started here. Let's move those ones out of the way. So all you need to start with is these felt pads. Great. They are, it's not just normal felt, it's a beaded felt. A lot of you probably have them, but they just stop your beads escaping everywhere. So they are a must. But if you don't have anything, a tray or something, just so they're not going to go spreading across the table. And then some needle nose pliers are helpful, and some cutters, but you might have cutters in your pliers. Depends what you've got. So the first thing is just to talk you through some of these little frames that we use. So if you're Googling these, you might call them a jewellery connector, they're often called, and you can get them in loads of different shapes and sizes. So just have a little look around. A lot of the beading stores online will sell them. And I do recommend starting off on something simple like this. You'll see that these frames are very even, so they're the same thickness all the way around. And I find it just helps starting on these to get used to wrapping the wire. But you can also get pieces like this, but you'll notice this is a little bit thicker on the bottom. It's also very bendy. It's very thin wire itself. So things like this are great and they look really effective, like so, but they are more difficult. So I'd recommend not working on something like this or this until you're comfortable on something that's quite even and easy. The other thing I would recommend is keeping it quite small. You can get pieces like this, which again look really, really effective, but they are much harder to get neat. So once you have got the hang of it on something small and even like this, something like this becomes much easier to handle. So that's just a few points on those frames. So I've got a massive stash of beads. What I tend to do is make myself a bit of a mood board, deciding what I fancy. So I am going to do greens today, because I find they go really well with gold. So I'm going to do 2 little gold pieces. So I tend to just tip out these. I'm not going to use all of these, but I just like to have a little mood board of beads ready to go, so I don't have to stop and look around. So decide on your colour scheme and then pour yourself out. This is just a great way. Sometimes it's hard until they're out of the tub to work out what looks nice together. So I'll leave those like that. And just a tip, because I'll probably forget at the end, if these all get messed up and you don't want to lose your mind by sorting them all back into the right tub, if you're only pouring a little bit out of a time, have yourself a little tub like this, and I call this bead soup. You can just chuck it in here at the end, and one day you will find use for all these spare beads, but it just means you don't have to sort out all the colours back into their pots at the end, because I've tried and it is slow and painful. So to start off, just going to check that I'm nice and close so that you can see. you are going to choose yourself a frame. So I'm going to go for these little shapes here, and then you want to get yourself some wire. So there's a couple of different kinds of wire. I'd always go for, if it says jewelry wire, it's going to have that flex to it. You might have some lying around the house, but I recommend going for a 0.4, between a 0.4 and a 0.6, and that just gives you a good thickness that will go through most beads, but it's not too thick that it's going to be really difficult to bend nicely. So the silver one I've got here is a little bit thicker. I find the thicker, I think this is 0.5, I find that really, really good to work with. And then the gold is 0.4. It's a little bit too soft for me, but then everyone's different. So when I do this in a workshop in person, some people prefer the gold. So I would recommend trying out a few different thicknesses and seeing which is your preference. So you probably can't see the wire here, but what I recommend is probably about 20 centimeters, maybe 30 a stretch, a cut piece. You don't want to do too much more, because it ends up getting all tangled and being really, really hard to get work on the frame with it. So keep it as a short piece. About 25-30 centimeters is going to do your whole earring. You're not going to have to add more bits on, but if at any point you find you need to add more bits on, it's also that it's not difficult to do, it's not hard. So I recommend you can do that. I'm just going to get a slightly darker mat so it should be easier for you to see what I'm doing. This might help a little bit better. Okay, so first thing you need to do is attach your wire. So you are going to hold with your finger and your thumb onto that first bit of wire, and you're just going to secure it. At the moment, the most important thing is ensuring it's nice and tight. It doesn't matter if it's sliding up and down, you can move it once you've got a nice secure fit. So to join it, you're just going to wrap that round the frame at least 3 times, but what I tend to do is wrap it round twice, and you'll see that this is a mess. It doesn't look neat and tidy. Don't worry at this stage. And what I will do is try and fiddle between the wire using the pliers, giving it a gentle pull, just to make sure it's nice and snug. And if you do it at this stage, right at the beginning, you're going to get a nice tight fit. So I'm going to wrap that one more time round. So it's gone round 3 times now. So you will see, hopefully you can see that, it's all spread apart, it's not close together. So I'm going to use my pliers here to push those all close together, and it's just going to tidy it up a little bit, make it a little bit neater. But again, that's something that will come with practice. The first few times you do it, you might find it looks a bit messy, but just remember, it's earrings. They're going to be in your, mixed up in your hair. People aren't going to see the details, so try not to get too stressed about it looking really neat and tidy. Just get started. I feel like that's the key, and you'll find it easier as you go. And by the end, you'll have perfectly wrapped knots. So I'm going to get my my cutters here, and I'm just going to cut as close to the end. I just want that little excess bit off. Oh, my cutters aren't very sharp. There we go. Okay, and the most important thing at this stage is that little excess piece, because this is going to be jewelry, you want to make sure that's tucked in and it's not going to stab anyone if they're wearing it, because it's going to be, if it's earrings, it's going to be up against your neck. If it's a necklace, it's going to be on your front. So you just want to make sure that's not going to snag any skin or clothing. So to do that, you just need to press the pliers side and forward, and then just to test that it's nice and smooth, you can run your hand on. If it catches, then you need to fiddle around a little bit more until it's nice and flush. Okay, so the next thing you need to do is decide which direction you want your piece to go. So I've got a little one I started earlier here, and I want mine to go all along the bottom, and I'm going to work up. So got my piece attached. I'm going to go in here. And what's nice about this, you don't have to faff with a needle. You're just going to use your wire and you're going to collect up how many beads you need. I always go for more than I think I'll need, and then it's easier to take them off than have to go back and add more. So let those slide down the wire, and then you'll just hold your piece here. I see there I've got one too many, so I'm going to pull one off, and then I'm laying that where I want it to be, and I can see they fit really nice. So what I'm going to do there is hold my thumb and my finger over the beads just to keep them still. Again, I'm not hugely worried at this point that it's staying in the right place because I can fiddle with that. What's really important to do is just to make sure that this this wrapping is nice and tight. So I'm going to do my first wrap. And what you need to do when you're wrapping, some of the wire, especially if it's 0.4, it can snap. If you're really pulling that hard, it can snap. So just make sure you're firm but gentle. What my mum always tells me I need to be with my kids. Firm but gentle. And then keep doing that 2 or 3 times. And again, if you can see my piece at the minute, it's not neat, it's not tidy. I'm really focusing on making sure that wrap is attached properly. I'll sort my beads out later. So depends how the number of wraps you do at the end of each line is all dependent on how thick your beads are and how much higher you need them to go. So on this one here, I've got different thicknesses of bead, which I think looks really nice. You can do something that's all the same. That might be easier to start with, because then you know how many wraps at the end of each row you need to do. But with something like this, after that first line of green, I needed to do, I think it was about 3 wraps until I went to my next line of beads. But then this top line of beads here is quite thick, so I had to do about 6 or 7 wraps until it was high enough to start the next line. And you'll just be able to see that because as you go, when you add the next line, you'll be able to see if it sits nice and flat. So at the end of this bit, again, I'm just going to pinch all these wires. This is quite fiddly, but pinch all those wires together just to make sure it looks nice and neat and tidy on both sides. And then I'm going to put my finger in the middle of the frame there, and it should just neaten up my line. There we go. So I'm quite happy with that. It's nice, nice and flat, nice and flush. If it is bending and you're finding it really hard to get those beads to behave themselves, don't worry too much about the first line. The first line's the hardest to do because it does tend to wobble all over the place. So as you go, adding more lines on top are going to start to stabilize things quite a lot. So you'll see here, these ones were quite, these ones move around quite a bit. So I found the first line really difficult, but once I started adding more beads, even though they're moving around side to side, they're not moving around up and down, so it ends up being quite secure. So don't worry too much if you can't get that first line to behave itself. Sometimes that's just what they're going to do. And again, I feel like this should be a nice relaxing craft. So if you're finding it stressing you out, try to think the first pair don't need to be perfect. You can gift those ones. That's what I always think. Someone else will think they're amazing. And then you can save your skills and do yourself a really lovely pair next. So it's just all about, oh, I flung my beads everywhere. Yeah, all about just practicing, and the more you do it, it is quite easy to pick up. So there we go. Another thing I would say is if you are doing this with somebody else, just make sure you don't sit too close, because this wire does tend to ping everywhere, and you don't want to blind the person sitting next to you. So just be aware. I wear glasses, so I've got a bit of protection there, but I wouldn't blame people for maybe putting on a pair of protective DIY goggles for this just when you're getting started, so you don't poke yourself in the eye or somebody else. I know a few people who just because they're crafty and they're drilling and doing things like this, they just wear clear lens glasses instead of big bulky DIY ones, but just gives them a little bit of protection. And they look great in glasses, so win-win. There's a little tip. Okay, so I've got to the end of my second line now. And again, I'm going to just repeat the same thing. So I'm going to show you what I mean about how many times I've wrapped here. So I've just wrapped the same amount there as I did on this side. But if I went to add my next line of slightly larger beads, I'll just put one on. If you're not sure with height, just start with one. And when I lie this flat, can you see how it's just not sitting right? It's going at an angle. So I want it to be able to go nice and flat, and I want it to sit on its own row. So I need to wrap that a little bit higher. So I'll pull that bead off, and then I'm going to go in again. Okay. And by this point, you might find that the wrapping you're finding it a little bit easier. It has stabilized a little bit. You're not having pieces flying all over the place now. So you might find the more you wrap, it's getting a bit easier. So I've added some more wrap, and you can see now the way I've put my wire, it's got a lot more space underneath, which means I should be able to fit that next bead on. So let's have a little look. One at a time again for this row. And there we go. It's fitting much nicer. So I realise it's quite hard to demonstrate this with it's fitting in there much nicer, and it's all going to be flat as a line rather than sticking out at an angle. So let's thread the rest of these on. So I quite like doing pieces that are a different size and shape. I just find it gives it quite a lot of character. And to be honest, I wouldn't say it's hugely more difficult than doing it with all the same size beads. So I also find it's great because generally in your bead collection, you have beads from all over the place, all different sizes, all different materials. So you don't have to go out and buy another pack of beads that are all exactly the same. And I just think it looks quite effective. So there we go. We're going to wrap this one again. Like so. Okay, so I'm going to carry on from this bit now. And I'm going to go, I'll show you here what you can do if you're using long beads. So if you're using, are they called bugles? Yeah, these long beads here, you might find things aren't going to fit in neatly. Typically, this is fitting in perfectly just because I wanted to show you what to do if it doesn't fit in perfectly. But when they're long beads like so, if you're really set on using them and they look really nice, but they don't quite fit in, I've got an example here. If you look on the bottom row, these beads they wouldn't fit any more in because of the curve. So what I'd done is found a really small seed bead, the same colour, and I popped that either side, just made sure I could make it as even as possible. So there's two on each side. You don't see from a distance, you don't see they're different beads, but it just means I don't have two big gaps where my beads can slide along. So it just helps it fit. So you can do that again with the bugles when they're long, or decide if on something like this, I try to do the pearl beads on the bottom, but because of the curve, it just didn't fit nicely. So I thought, oh, I'll use them in the next few rows up where they'll fit equally, and then I don't have to add beads either side. So have a little play around. It might just be that it doesn't sit in that row, but when it gets narrower towards the top, you're able to put things in at a different place. So it's all just about having a little fiddle and not really being too attached to a plan. I think this is one of these crafts where if you're a perfectionist, it might make it a little bit harder. But yeah, having a little bit, just relaxing a little bit and trying to enjoy the process, I find really helps. I enjoy myself more if I haven't got any ideas before I start. Okay. So again, I'm just going to squeeze that closed, like so. So in terms of how you want your design to go, it depends on the shape of your piece, what's best to do. So with something like this, because I have done it lengthways and I want my beads to continue going lengthways, if I was to put a hook in here now, much like this one, it's gonna spin all over the place, which for a keyring's probably fine, but for an earring, you don't want one earring to be like this and one earring to be like that. So you want to have a little think about what you can do to remedy that. So with this, what I would do is make sure I bead it all the way to the top, so that when I put my hook on, secure my hook up to the top there, I can fit it between two beads in the top row, and it's not going to move around. I'm going to have an earring that stays nice and straight on both sides. The other thing you could do is turn it so it's on an angle, or you could bead it with a point at the top. And if you're beading it then with the point at the top, you don't have to bead it all the way up like this. I'll show you this one because it's got a hook on already. So this one, you know, gravity's just going to do its thing. It's not going to move around up there or up there because it's got a point to hold it in the right place. So just a thought about that when you're designing your piece. Another thing to say is that you don't have to just follow the line of the frame that you're using either. So something like this is a little bit more fiddly. They will, if you have a look here, if I can press them and they're not going to sit, you know, they will move. There's some movement in them, which is why they're a bit more tricky to do. But you know, you don't have to just start at the top and end at the bottom. You can join and finish things all round the piece, especially when you've got something bigger like this to work with. That can look really effective. So I recommend starting where you're just going top to bottom or bottom to top, doesn't matter which way you go, and then seeing which one, and then having a go at something a little bit more complex like this. So I'm just going to show you on here how to finish off, and it's exactly the same really as the way you start. So you just want to make sure you've got at least 3 wraps to finish something off. That's just to make sure it's nice and secure. You're going to give it that gentle but firm tug, and then you're going to go in there, snip off your piece, and you're going to make sure you tuck that piece of wire nice and snug behind there so it's not going to catch anyone. Is a bit fiddly, this bit, but it's worth taking the time on, especially if you're giving them as a gift. Don't want to hurt anyone. So yeah, that one's still snagging. You can as well, if you've got a file, you can use a file, but as long as it's pressed in, it should be absolutely fine. Because the wire is so thin, it does kind of press the wire down. So you've got your finished piece there. So now you've just got to decide what you want to add to it. So I might actually hang this upside down, so I've got the beads at the top to secure my piece. But just to give you an idea, you don't have to stop there. You can add, I love to add like a little tassel. So you can add a little tassel, especially when you've used something small, done a small frame. It's just a really nice little extra to add in there. So all you need to do that, just move this along, are jump rings. So hopefully you've all used jump rings before, but just in case anyone's watching who hasn't, jump rings, they're quite difficult for me to demonstrate because they're quite fiddly, but there's just a little split at the top of the ring. You can use your fingers, you can use pliers, up to you. You can also use these little jump ring holders which do like so, but either way you need to grasp each side of the gap and you want to push one forward and one back. So one towards yourself, keep hold of it with the plier, pop it, oh let me get it the right way, pop it in there, and then you're just going to close it back up again. Oh, I find these jump ring closers very fiddly to use. Right, let's use my fingers, always easier. There we go. So again, I've got the problem because I've not done this with beads on the bottom, so it's going to move around, but you get the example. I would have beaded this all the way. Just don't want you to sit and watch. I feel like it might be a bit boring. So I'd have beaded that all the way so that then my piece would hang quite nicely there in the middle with no movement. Just adds to it, makes it a little bit more fun. And then the last thing you're going to need to do, let's do it on this one because this one's all finished nicely, is get whichever. I find these hooks work really well. You want something that's not too long. I use hoops a lot, but hoops for these kind of things are just a little bit too long. And also ball studs, I think, work really, really well. Especially if you don't like anything too long, they stop the length being too long. So with these, you're just going to open up the little bit at the bottom there, bending it open, and then you're just going to thread it through. You don't need any more jump rings for these, which is nice. Bend that closed, and then you've got your earring all ready to wear. So that works really well. Same again if you wanted to do a key ring. All you'd need to do is add a jump ring, thread that through the last chain, and then you've got your key ring all ready to go, like so. These are great for kids. They love them on their bags. And then another thing you can do as well, I just take that jump ring off, is close it up, the jump ring there, and thread a chain through it. Like so. I've used gold and silver here, so forgive me. But yeah, they work really nicely like this as well. And then you can, last demonstration here, you can add a bit of yarn, a bit of rope, whatever you work with, and make it finish off a necklace like that as well. So hopefully that'll give you lots of ideas of what to do with your large bead supply for anything like me. I do recommend, I was just chatting before I came on live, but do recommend going into charity shops and looking at the old jewellery. Often I'll look past things and think, oh, I don't like that. But I've started to look at them now and be like, oh, do I like the beads though? Because they might not look great as a necklace, but they might look great added then onto a piece, and you can totally change them and you're spending £1 or £2. Whereas if you bought a necklace worth of beads online on a bead shop, it's gonna, you can really whack up the bill. So the postage itself is normally £2.95. So I do recommend going and having a look. My granddad is a boot market man, and he gets hundreds of beads for me off the boot market, just big hits where people have decided to sell them for like a tenner for thousands of beads. So I'm all for secondhand where you can. So I do recommend, before you go bead shopping online and spend a fortune, go and have a little nosy secondhand and see what you can find. Fab, I hope you have found that fun, and I hope you all get to have a go. If there are any questions, I don't think I can, if I can stay around, I will stay around, but pop them in the chat. But otherwise, thanks for joining and have a lovely day. Bye.